Broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by theunshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everyone and welcome to the midweek edition of WilmsFront. Today is Wednesday, the 30th of September 2020. We are live on the WilmsFront YouTube and DLive channels and also on the interactive entropy software where you can ask questions of myself or my guest and also send through super chats to support the production of the show. George Christensen, who is my guest for tonight, he will be joining at approximately 1:30. It is just past 7 p.m. in stage 3.7 lockdown Melbourne. We took another small step out of lockdown this week. No giant leaps, more like 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. On Sunday, Dan Andrews announced a modified step 2 out of lockdown for Melbourne, which is why I'm referring to it as stage 3.7 instead of the stage 3.8 I had been referring to it as, because the curfew is no longer in place as Dan planned to continue, which coincidentally was just before the Supreme Court challenge to the curfew was to be held this week. It is still ongoing. There's not a decision yet. And also Jim's Mowing sole traders have been allowed to return again, coincidentally, because Jim's Mowing owner Jim Penman was planning a class action against the Andrews government on behalf of his franchises and has been very vocal in the media and with Reignite Democracy Australia in opposing the continuing Dan Andrews lockdowns. But as always, dictator Dan Andrews is reluctant to give away too much of his control and return too much freedom to the people. The 5-kilometre travel radius limit remains, not due to any medical advice, but in using Dan's own words, it's logical to him that if you travel outside of that 5-kilometre radius, there's more chance the virus will spread. Also, Dan has upped the fine for illegal indoor and outdoor private gatherings from $1,652 to $4,957. This is the same as the fine for leaving Melbourne to go to regional Victoria and also for ignoring isolation orders. The only private gatherings that are allowed outdoor gatherings or in public spaces with a maximum of 5 people from a maximum of 2 households, and the only visitors allowed to a private home inside or outside that private property, intimate partners or a bubble buddy of a single. Dan is also tightening the rules around face coverings, literally tightening them, because whenever you leave the home, even if you are the only person within a 1-kilometre radius in the open air, you must wear a fitted face mask, which now bans bandanas, scarves and face shields. Dan revealed that this new face mask mandate, which I'll be referring to it as from now on, not a face covering mandate as was previously the case. And I should also make the point, he hasn't ruled out continuing this mask mandate over summer. It is another captain's call by him, or dictatorial decree, as it's being referred to, as it is not based on the best medical advice. It's just something that he's decided, and he doesn't think is a big deal to require people to wear masks outside in 35-degree heat, potentially. Also this week, pet grooming can resume, but not human hairdressers. Outdoor pools can open, but not golf courses. You think that the reason for golf continuing to be banned, even though there's never been a confirmed coronavirus case that has been traced to a game of golf, is pretty much to spite Sam Newman, given he has been so outspoken against the Andrews government. Cricket nets can reopen, but not tennis courts. You can fish and hike, but only for the 2-hour exercise, recreational, social maximum, but only within your 5-kilometre radius. So if you don't live within within a national park or a fishing area, then you can't obviously fish or hike. There are so many arbitrary and inconsistent rules continuing to govern our daily lives. On Monday morning, we heard from Victorian Police Commissioner Shane Patton, who said that police on this weekend would be surveilling public parks and residential streets and urged the public to dob in their neighbours if there are too many cars parked outside their property. He said police would be cracking down on the triple Ps, parties, picnicking and protesting, and would rarely exercise discretion in issuing the new nearly $5,000 fine. Meanwhile, the new daily coronavirus case numbers continue to go down. 13 was the new cases for today, with Melbourne's 14-day rolling new case average standing at 16.4, continuing to go down. Daily deaths are continuing, however, with 4 today as aged care outbreaks are continuing. Dan, in his announcements on Sunday, brought forward the review date for Melbourne to take the third step out of lockdown, which would see hospitality and retail reopen and bubble households allowed. That would take place on October the 19th, which is 1 week ahead of what was originally on his roadmap, October 26th. But we'd still have to meet the benchmark that he set, which is 5 nearly day case, 14-day average statewide, and 5 mystery cases. The mystery cases still continue to go down, with the cases that are still under investigation, the new cases that he announces every day. He always says a certain amount are under investigation. Normally they are tracked to known outbreaks. Dan has repeatedly denied that he's pursuing an elimination strategy, despite the statement of his now ex-Health Minister, Jenny Mikakos, who resigned Saturday morning after Dan essentially threw her under the bus, telling the hotel quarantine inquiry during his 2-hour testimony on Friday afternoon that he regarded her as accountable for the hotel quarantine program. Jenny Mikakos, she is the first Victorian government minister to fall on her sword and resign. In her resignation statement, she said she was deeply sorry for the situation Victorians find themselves in, but her voluntary resignation is still cold comfort for all the Victorians who have involuntarily lost their jobs, had their businesses closed, still confined to house arrest due to her government's continued lockdown. Mikakos will also leave Parliament on a full parliamentary pension. The others who have lost their jobs because of her government's incompetence will only have access to JobKeeper or JobSeeker. Andrews has repeatedly rebuffed renewed calls for he himself to resign, saying he does not run from problems and challenges. A lot of people have said, yeah, you only create them. Mikakos, she's the first minister in Dan Andrews' crisis Council of Cabinet, or the Gang of Eight as they are known, to resign. Many have pondered the question, could Victorian government ministers such as Mikakos and Andrews and Jobs Minister Martin Pecula and their associated bureaucrats be held criminally liable for the 768 deaths attributed to the state's second wave because of the hotel quarantine failures under their own industrial manslaughter laws? In a closing submission to the inquiry, Council assisting the hotel quarantine inquiry wrote that the failure of Victoria's hastily assembled hotel quarantine program to contain the coronavirus was responsible for the deaths of, at the time of writing, 768 people, and the infection at the time of writing of 18,000 others. And although she didn't say this, but I would say by extension, it can be argued that it's responsible for the second lockdown. Any admission of liability by the ministers and bureaucrats, and this has been suggested why they all had amnesia, would cause them to be prosecuted under Victorian OH&S law, and if they were found guilty, they could face a potential jail sentence of up to 25 years and a fine of $16.5 million. Also, what happened this morning, Australian time, was the first US presidential debate, and might I say that it was great to finally view a live event that wasn't coronavirus and Victorian related. It was certainly a much better watch than Dan Andrews' daily press conference, even though it's part of my job to watch the daily press conferences of Dan and to report upon his various decrees. There's only so much that I, as a Victorian and Melburnian, can take. So it was actually a good break that the news cycle today was dominated by the election debate. Pundits have called it the worst debate in US presidential election history and an embarrassment to democracy. Of course, they would say that, wouldn't they? They want stuffy presidential looking candidates making the debate as dry and boring as possible and having the candidates fit within the 3x5 card of allowable opinion. Fox News host Chris Wallace was moderator, and even though he does host Fox News Sunday, he has the reputation of being pretty much a very straight newsman. I would say that he was clearly the loser of the debate, Chris Wallace, due to his lame topics and failure to properly moderate the debate. Trump was his usual boisterous and flamboyant self. He constantly interrupted Biden during his answers. Biden, amazingly to a lot of people, held it together for the whole 90 minutes extremely well, which would impress undecided voters, which in my opinion makes him the winner because there was hardly any brain fade moments, and when he did say something incorrect, he corrected himself. That's not to say that he didn't tell plenty of lies during his debate. I know that the fact checkers are very busy going through all the statements that were made. Trump didn't go in as hard as he did. I would argue that probably he was showing Biden a bit of mercy, thinking that if we went too hard against Biden, he might have had a breakdown on the stage and would have been seen as too cruel. So definitely, maybe it was because it's been well documented that Biden is reading off teleprompters during press interviews. There's still a lot of rumors circulating around that he had a wire on his earpiece during the debate, or that he was given the questions in advance. Even if that is the case, as we've seen, Biden has even stuffed up his soft interviews with the mainstream media. So it was an extremely competent performance from him, and maybe that if the Democrats allowed him out of the basement or bunker, as it's constantly referred to, got some fresh air, which he has been on the campaign trail, maybe that's what he needs to sort of get his mental state better. So I think the Biden campaign will be very satisfied with his performance. Trump, I think, will up the attacks on Sleepy Joe. I think he'll be, when it's dawn in the United States tonight, I think he'll be busy tweeting about Sleepy Joe, and he will definitely go in harder in the next two scheduled US debates. There was a lot of talk about whether the debates would actually take place. Nancy Pelosi, the US House Speaker, she questioned whether Biden should debate Trump at all. But it happened. There was no bailing. And yeah, I think it was, looking at objectively, I think the risk paid off for Biden, because there'd be a lot of Americans who probably aren't paying attention to the 24-hour news cycle like we do, who always watch Fox, CNN, MSNBC, and would say that, yeah, he looked presidential. He gave it back to Trump as much as he could. And I notice Biden, of course, is trying to moderate himself. He's saying, no, I don't support violent protesters. I'm not a socialist who's an apologist for violent extremists. No, I don't support the Green New Deal. That I have my own Biden plan. One of his more funny gaffes, though not sort of catastrophic gaffes, when he said, I am the Democratic Party. So election day is, make sure I get the exact date right here. It is on Tuesday, November 3rd, which means that the votes will begin to be counted Australian time on Wednesday, the 4th of November, around about midday. And of course, the big question about the US presidential election, with the increase in mail-in ballots, with the allegations that Trump ballots have been discarded in the garbage, will we get a result on election night? And since the Democrats have been the ones that are pushing for mail-in voting, there could be a case where Trump is winning the swing states of Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan on election night and could claim victory, but the mail-in process could tip those states in Biden's favor. So there could be many days, weeks before an eventual winner is certified. Now, it's important to note that the president isn't sworn in until January 20th, 2021. So there is this basic 3-month, as it's called, lame duck period. So the Electoral College meets in early January to formally elect the president. So they certainly have got a lot of time to count the votes. But certainly the more uncertainty there is, there's certainly the more chance of continued unrest in the United States. With obviously the unrest is centered on the US West Coast, the states of California, Oregon, and Washington, particularly those cities of Portland and Seattle. Obviously, Antifa and Black Lives Matter have been able to run rampant there due to the enablement of the local Democrats. I'll just put the entropy link in again so you can join over here, and I'll also put it here in DLive. Other news is that obviously I've commented both on the Unshackled and also through the various shows about the UK being on the path back to lockdown. Though there is a Tory backbench rebellion against Boris Johnson and his Health Secretary Matt Hancock. The new lockdown measures, the nanny state, police state nature of the lockdown provisions. So there is some pushback against them going to a second lockdown and potentially them all being under house arrest for Christmas, which would be absolutely devastating for the people of the UK. There's still some people, particularly old people in nursing homes, who still haven't been released from lockdown in the UK, been able to see relatives, friends and family since March. Sorry, when you do an opening monologue, it's easy for your mouth to get dry because you're talking so much. There's not much time, because if you stop talking, then there's nothing, no sound on the stream. We did hear this week that the global coronavirus death toll has passed 1 million. So the mainstream media networks, CNN, they all had their pre-packaged stories to run about the deadly impact of the coronavirus this 2020. Obviously, down here in the southern hemisphere, we're coming out of our winter. And obviously, summertime is virus frying time, but in the northern hemisphere, they're going into winter, and that is where, obviously, in the cold, viruses like the flu and, by extension, the coronavirus thrive. So the northern hemisphere is going to go through a tumultuous end of year if there is no vaccine found for the coronavirus. We know that Joe Biden, if he wins the election, he wants to have a national mask mandate. We don't even know whether that would be constitutional in the US, but hey, constitutions this year or human rights charters haven't stopped governments doing whatever they like in the name of curtailing the pandemic. Joe Biden has claimed that everyone wearing masks would save 100,000 lives, which I don't know how he could back that up, given that, well, it's roughly about 220,000 that have died in the US from the coronavirus. Obviously, the worst death toll was early in the pandemic in March, April in the states of New York and New Jersey. As I mentioned, there is 2 more presidential debates, but the next one is going to be the vice presidential debate between Vice President Mike Pence and Californian Senator Kamala Harris. So that will be interesting, much more different than the debate we just saw, because obviously Mike Pence is a much more clean-cut, professional-looking politician. He's certainly the former Indiana governor is sort of how politicians in the US used to present themselves. Obviously, I'm not sure if you saw him speak at the Republican National Convention, but he's got a very proud family. A lot of them are in the armed forces. Obviously, what was also announced, or discussed, I should say, in the debate tonight was the Supreme Court nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, the appeals court justice that was nominated by Trump to fill the vacancy that on the Supreme Court that has been become, I wouldn't say available, but has opened up because of the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the 87-year-old justice. Liberal feminist she was described as. Obviously, Joe Biden is arguing, and so are the Senate Democrats, that the new president should pick the nominee, and the new Senate should confirm or choose not to confirm the president's nominee. Obviously, the Republicans controlling the Senate, they will be able to push forward her confirmation before the election, or even during the lame duck period after the election, because the new Congress doesn't take its place until January the 1st the next year. Democrats and progressives online have begun already smearing Amy Coney Barrett, attacking her Catholic faith, accusing her of stealing black children because she's got 2 adopted black children amongst her 7 total children, and obviously attacking her Catholic beliefs, even though Joe Biden himself is a practicing Catholic. In fact, Joe Biden was the first Catholic vice president. So this has been this very weird, your cognitive dissonance between Democrats attacking her because she's Catholic, yet they're supporting a Catholic for president. And it was the Democratic Party that provided the US with its first and only Catholic president in John F. Kennedy. So, but of course, we know that if the left didn't have double standards, they would have no standards, as the expression goes. Democrats, they've also pondered with the idea of court packing, because even though the Supreme Court has been set at 9 for the past over a century, there's nothing to stop a potential new Democrat president and Democrat Congress from extending the amount of justices from 9 to 15 or however, so they can just stack the court with liberal justices who would, of course, uphold liberal interpretations of the Constitution and create a whole bunch of other made-up rights from the Constitution. Last president who tried this was Franklin Roosevelt in the 30s during the Great Depression, where they knocked out much of his New Deal. He eventually dumped the proposal, Franklin Roosevelt, because it just became so politically unpopular. But it would be a very undemocratic and you would say a really callous political course of action to take if they were to do that. They could do that. You wouldn't put it past them to do that, but it would be extremely unprecedented. As I've said in my introduction and in the description, George Christensen should be joining us at approximately past. I'm just waiting for him to join the stream. I'll take this opportunity to remind you both about that if you want to ask either myself or George a question throughout the show. Obviously, there's a lot that I want to ask him, and I know you would as well, as a federal member of parliament. He certainly can influence things more than us ordinary citizens. Though he's obviously having he's doing his best to speak up for Victorians, but obviously he's got to speak up for his constituents in Central Queensland first, given that obviously Labor Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk, she is continuing with the state border closure, even though she has relaxed it a bit to allow the 10 local government areas in northern New South Wales to move freely there, and also allowing ACT residents to travel freely into Queensland. So George is just joining the call now. I'll properly introduce him when he's on the screen. There he is. There, I'll just bring you on screen, George.
Thanks, Tip.
I'll try to give you the best and most concise introduction to our viewers to get us started. Well, it is us Melburnians who've suffered the worst throughout Australia with the pandemic and the lockdowns. In other states and territories, border closures and arbitrary rules are still crippling people's daily lives, business viability, and are tearing families apart. The decade of the 2020s in Australia will be the toughest in our nation's history, certainly in my lifetime. Even if the coronavirus is eliminated or a vaccine is found, the economic and fiscal devastation by the associated lockdowns will be felt by ordinary Australians for many years to come. So how can Australia bounce back from this horror year and get back on the path to freedom and prosperity? Well, I thought that George Christensen would be a good man to ask, given that he can help influence federal government policy. He's been the Liberal National Party of Queensland member for Dawson since 2010, which takes in the Central Queensland city of Mackay. He sits in the National Party room in Canberra, and he's also this year launched his own podcast this year, Conservative One, as part of the Good Source Network. So, George, I'll properly welcome you to WilmsFront.
Thank you. And before we begin, Tim, I've had, as you know, some two-bit journalist profile. He found that I actually liked the Unshackled Facebook page and accused you guys of being neo-Nazis. So I have to do this checklist. Are you a neo-Nazi?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Are you a racist?
No.
No, okay, that's fine. Do you spread conspiracy theories?
No.
Okay, no, that's fine. But you did wear some funny T-shirt about Pinochet.
Yes, I do have that T-shirt.
3 out of 4, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, so
we can go ahead. We can continue the conversation now because I can now not be what's the word? Guilty by association.
Oh yeah, but you could be guilty of my 6 or 7 degrees of separation.
Yeah, well, and look, you're guilty of this blatant promotion as well from mining country.
I heard that apparently the Palaszczuk Labor government they suddenly support coal now as well because it's Queensland election time.
That's right. They're all. It's hilarious actually to see these people who stood up with green protesters, shaking their hands, accepting their petitions, singing Kumbaya with them, and dancing to their ukuleles. And saying that we listen to the Green movement, our government respects the Green movement. And now an election's on, they realise that there's a big problem. And they're all out there in high-vis and hard hats, pretending that they're for the mining industry. I just had locally here the Premier fly into town and announce the approval of a coal mine that it just so happened was approved over 12 months ago. So re-announcing approvals to try and show that they're pro-mining. It's really, really, truly bizarre.
That's awful. Well, spin of the worst kind and taking the voters for mugs. But definitely this year, voters, well, particularly in Victoria, with a lot of Victorians thrown out of work and put under house arrest, they've got a lot of time on their hands to be more informed about politics, which is the silver lining.
Yeah, well, I feel very badly for all those people in Victoria and Queensland. It's just been absolutely shocking. Victoria they have really just trampled all over freedom and liberty. And there's always a reason for it. There's always some reason for it, but they've just trampled all over it. And in Queensland now, with the shutdown of the borders, literally, if I get time, after I finish this interview with you tonight, I've got to call a woman down in Victoria whose mother died in Mackay.
Yes, I saw you post on Facebook about that. Another heartbreaking story.
Well, it gets even worse now, is that she informs my office today that they got the approval. They got the approval the day after the mother died. And I'll read a section I'm not going to name names, but I'll read a section from the message. It's just dreadful. She says to me, Our efforts have been in vain. We finally, after 8 days, did get an answer from the health department late yesterday, but my mother had already passed away earlier that day. They gave us approval to fly to Queensland, though, but we would have to quarantine at a government-approved hotel at our own expense for 14 days. We're unable to self-quarantine at my brother's house as requested. To add salt in our already wounded hearts, we were not, and the word not was placed in capital letters, allowed to leave quarantine for the funeral. Absolutely and utterly insane.
Can I just ask, obviously you're receiving a lot of these correspondence, how do you get through it emotionally? Because I know I was saying in my introduction, even though it's part of my job to keep my viewers informed about what the new arbitrary rules are in Victoria and what Dan's decided, there's only so much I myself can take mentally from it, and I'm one of the lucky ones. How does it impact you, and particularly, obviously you have staff in your office to receive those calls and emails? That must also break their hearts as well.
It does have an impact, particularly at the frontline staff in the office. But more than anything, because I went through my own mother's death in recent memory, it makes me very angry, actually, to think that that's the emotion that comes out of me, anger. And I think, boy, oh boy, I am so lucky it wasn't me, because I would be in jail. Like, sorry, I'd say, well, to whoever it was that was stopping me from going, you're just going to have to take me and physically put me behind bars, because I'm going. The only way I'm not going is if someone stops me. So that's how angry the behaviour of the government makes me feel.
Now, obviously, next week in Canberra, it's the federal budget, October 6th. I should ask you first, will you be present in Canberra?
Well, no, I won't be, but not because of any lockdowns, because recently I found that my nose is full of basal cell carcinoma, so I'm having one of my local GPs here put a blowtorch to my nose to remove all the skin cancers. But anyway, I'll be zooming in, or I don't know, WebExing into the parliamentary proceedings earlier in the week.
Well, I'm glad that you can still get that treatment, because obviously with the stage 4 lockdown in Melbourne, elective surgery was suspended again, and people don't stop getting ailments or are sick from other things during this pandemic. So that's certainly reassuring that in Queensland you can get that. Is it still... I don't even like this term, elective surgery. It's basically non-urgent surgery.
Well, that's really what elective means. I mean, elective doesn't mean I've decided to go and get this done. It's often some painful ailment that people have that they're getting seen to, and been waiting a long time to get it seen to.
And now obviously the final budget deficit figure will be announced by Josh Frydenberg next week. The deficits that have been reported in the media is 83 billion for this year and 180 billion for next year. When I hear those figures, it leaves me convulsing, because, well, I'm 30 years old. This is going to be with me, my debt for the rest of my life. You're relatively young as well, so you'll be around to see, well, hopefully to see some of this debt being paid off. But how does it make you feel when you hear these massive deficits being projected? Because it's got to be paid back. It's borrowed from somewhere.
Yeah. Look, what worries me the most is actually that there just doesn't seem to be much concern about this fact out in the public sphere. And, the day of reckoning always comes where you have to pay, and the money just doesn't come out of thin air. We borrow that money. and the people we borrow it from are mainly people in China and the Middle East. And look, the only thing that makes me a little bit more, I guess I'm not in the stage of self-flagellation over it, because the reality is the whole world has had to go further into debt, and the situation, I guess, to some degree, was if we didn't do measures, so didn't undertake certain measures, that there would be massive economic harm right now. But I think that probably like you and a lot of listeners, the economic harm was exacerbated by government actions and prolonged longer, and it's still being prolonged longer than what is really necessary. And, so the government's causing the harm, principally state government, sadly, and the federal government's having to pick up the compensatory tab for all of the harm that's been caused.
Which has exposed this massive imbalance and brokenness in our federation. And is that why the Morrison government has been so firm that JobKeeper will end in March 21? Is this basically to put in place a deadline for all the states and territories? You need to reopen fully by that time, open up your borders, that's it. There'll be no more support from us. You're not going to try and manipulate us any further.
Look, I'm not sure that the thinking has been along the lines of using it as a political weapon, but I would just say that the thinking's obviously that supported wage structures just can't continue forever. I mean, we can't have a situation where the government is simply going to pay everyone's wages, or a proportion of everyone's wages. I mean, that's just insanity to think that can continue. But there's been a slight reduction in the wage supports of JobKeeper, and it's tightened up a bit in terms of you actually have to prove that you've got that sort of negative impact on your business before your workers will get the benefit of JobKeeper. But we've got Labor MPs that are running around saying, "Oh my goodness, they're cutting businesses. They're cutting them from JobKeeper." Well, the only way you're going to be cut, so to speak, is if your business is actually not doing badly. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. But it just seems that the Labor Party right now have this mentality that now we want this JobKeeper to be in place even for businesses that aren't doing badly. And I'm not sure how long they want it to continue on for. But it's got to come to an end. Sooner or later, it's got to come to an end. But so too do the negative impacts. That's the thing. And I just sorry to butt in there, but let's just look at some of the key facts. The virus, the China flu, the Wuhan coronavirus, has got a 997 out of 1,000 survival rate. These are the inconvenient facts. We know that the CDC says that the American experience, which is if you believe what you read in the media, being terrible and everything, but the American experience has been that only 6% of deaths actually were solely caused by coronavirus. That other 94% there were comorbidities of 2 or more. So it probably brought on death that may have happened at some point anyway. And then we've got you got the other thing that came out, the World Health Organization, saying that it's very rare for people who are asymptomatic to spread the virus. Now, they tried to come out and backtrack on that because they had a whole heap of people arguing against them or telling them they shouldn't have said that. And they said, oh, no, we shouldn't have said very rare. What we should have said was just the facts that we've done. We've got a few studies out there. One of the studies showed that 0 people who are asymptomatic with coronavirus actually transmitted the virus. The other one, which was at the high end, showed 17%. So we got a virus that has got a high survivability rate, a virus that mainly kills people that have pre-existing morbidities of at least two, and a virus which, by and large, isn't normally spread by people who don't have symptoms. So, given those three facts, and they're not opinions, these are not George Christensen's opinions, these are empirical facts. Given these empirical facts, can't we manage this? Can't we manage it?
And what you've just said, that's also been admitted by our own Chief Health Officer down here in Victoria, Dr. Brett Sutton. But it's very clear now that obviously he doesn't have much influence in they're being referred to as captain's calls by Dan Andrews. I more crudely refer to them as dictatorial decrees. He's certainly, Brett Sutton, a better person than your Chief Health Officer up there, Dr. Jeanette Young, who seems to be more than willing to basically carry the can for Anastasia Palaszczuk and own all these cruel and illogical decisions about border exemptions.
Yeah, so the story goes that the decisions are not being made by our elected officials; they're being made by the Chief Health Officer in Queensland. And I got to say that look, I don't care who's making it. If it's Jeanette Young, here's the thing: you've kept a woman away from seeing her dying mother in my electorate. But the reality is that the Premier could have overruled that. She didn't. And whoever's making decisions, it's heartless, and it really flies in the face of these three very manageable facts about the virus.
And I also didn't know she was also the state's chief economics officer, because she said the reason that she had granted exemptions for the AFL and Tom Hanks to come into Queensland and quarantine in a resort hub is because they bring in a lot of money to the state.
Yeah, well, and that really rankled people. Look, there's a lot of people that have been amped up by the fear that's just been spread through the mainstream media, where 10 cases today or 2 cases today, and there's a new front that's opened, all this sort of real frightening stuff, like the coronavirus is around the corner waiting to pounce on you. So a lot of people have been caught up in that fear that's been spread by the mainstream media. And so I will admit there's a few people who are saying, oh no, it's good that the borders have got kept shut in Queensland. But one thing that's almost universal is the fact that there's condemnation for these two rules. One rule for the rich and famous and powerful, and another rule for us everyday plebs, who can't go and see a dying parent, who can't go and attend a parent's funeral, like that girl from Canberra who had to be dressed head to toe in what looked like the kind of outfit you'd go and visit Chernobyl in, to go and see the body of a dead parent. So now a dead person's going to catch the virus off the mother. I mean, it's just really weird stuff.
When I hear because I'm in Melbourne at the moment, we're living by the new daily case numbers, but certainly for a lot of Victorians now, where more and more Victorians, it's when we hear the new daily cases, it's not we're not actually thinking, oh no, coronavirus is about. We're thinking, oh no, that's more time that we're going to be deprived of our human rights and civil liberties. That's more and more the attitude now here in Victoria, and obviously we have had massive community transmission here. I know people who've gotten the virus, and yes, it wasn't pleasant, but they recovered. That certainly hasn't changed their point of view that, these lockdowns can't go on forever. We can't eliminate the virus completely, which seems to be the secret policies of the state and territory leaders rather than the official National Cabinet policy of suppression.
Well, it's not so secret. I mean, that obviously is the strategy that they're deploying. I mean, you heard it once, you heard it 1,000 times, the old saying of let's flatten the curve, or we're flattening the curve. That meant that we're getting transmission rates down to a manageable level, not that we're getting rid of the virus. You can't get rid of a virus. It is viral. You know, imagine a politician or a chief medical officer, for that matter, standing up and explaining to the public that this year we're going to stop the flu. We're going to stop the flu. There will be no influenza in Australia. I mean, people would probably think they're nuts, think they're smoking what they're growing. And yet here they're up there acting as if, and I got to say, getting a fair bit of traction, because most people don't understand coronavirus. New name, it's a new term for them. You know, it's a new experience for everyone, a pandemic. So they're just believing what they're hearing, and what they're hearing through the mainstream media, sadly. But I think that eyes are starting to open now. Facts are emerging. People are questioning. People are seeing heartless decisions being made. People are seeing freedoms being whittled away. And they're just saying, hang a tick, even if there is some virus, even if all of that stacks up, this cure is worse than the disease.
I think definitely in March, where we didn't know much about their coronavirus or COVID-19, because who would trust a thing that comes out of China and its sympathizers in the World Health Organization. So I know you were rightly skeptical about what was the truth about this virus, and so we all agreed with the idea to flatten the curve so we could learn more about the virus. Our hospital system wouldn't be overwhelmed. But we know much more about this virus and its impact 6 months later than we did back in March.
Yeah. So, Tim, the reception there was a little bit jittery, but I think I picked up what you were saying, that, you know, basically earlier this year when the pandemic sort of broke out, there was a high level of probably justified fear, because we really didn't know what the hell was going to happen with this virus. But now we've sort of experienced it for a while, and we know what the facts are. And that's right. You know, I think it was the Imperial College out of London was saying that this was going to be, you know, just chaos writ large, that people are going to be dying left, right, and centre. That and it all didn't come to pass. It didn't. Thank goodness it didn't come to pass. The predictions just didn't happen. There's now, you know, but also what shouldn't have come to pass was this shouldn't have gotten out of China at all. We know for a fact that China actually locked down its internal borders to stop people from Wuhan going into, say, neighbouring states, going to Beijing, and at the same time let people from Wuhan come to all four corners of the planet, including Australia. So basically that was an indication that China, the Communist Party of China, actually knew that this was a problem. This virus was transmissible, and they didn't want it transmitted anywhere else in China, but they were happy for it to be transmitted elsewhere in the world. There's an article that just popped up the other day in, I think it was Tablet magazine, and I can't recall off the top of my head the author, but the premise that they put forward was actually very interesting. More than just a passing theory, there was some substance to it. There was some evidence they put forward to say that all of the things that stoked up the fear, and actually, just as an aside, can I say that I haven't subscribed to this view until I read that article, and suddenly it dawned upon me, if indeed some of the facts in this article bear out to be correct, and I think that they probably will be. The images we see of people falling over in the streets in China the images that really alarmed people. Even the doctor who died of it, that had his ID card held up in a photo, all of that was actually released by Chinese Communist Party organs. You got to say, like, why were they putting this out? And then they say the spread of them through social media, through Twitter and Facebook and the rest of it, was all done by, well, not all, but largely done by Chinese bots. And it was then the question was put: was this a massive disinformation campaign to make the world think that the zombie apocalypse was coming with this virus or something? And then it went to Italy, and China has a very cozy relationship with the Italian government and was in there telling them, no, you got to lock down harder. You got to lock down harder. You just got to suppress the populace, basically. This is what you got to do to control it. This is what we did. And so Italy did that, and then that became the template for the rest of the world. And this is a bit of a conspiracy theory, and we said at the start we went into conspiracy theories, but you got to ask the question: did this happen? Did China make shoot ourselves in the foot by causing the rest of the world to lock down their economies, to shut down their economies, while they went and prevailed? Did they make us? The old saying about they won the war without firing a shot. Well, did they win the war by making ourselves shoot ourselves in the feet? We don't know, but it's certainly an interesting observation.
Well, I've certainly learnt a lot more about China's new types of warfare over the past year, particularly their foreign interference campaigns. And yes, it's not a traditional type of a conflict or operation. This is obviously the 21st century. There's much more different avenues of affecting your adversaries.
Yeah. China looks at everything. There's a book, I've got it over there actually, on one of the shelves behind me, called Unrestricted Warfare, which really people like Stephen Bannon telling everyone that you must read this, because this is the playbook. This is the Chinese Communist Party playbook for our modern era. And what it boils down to is that everything is to be viewed through the prism of warfare. That you have information warfare, you have economic warfare, you use every different measure to basically subjugate your opponents. And we look what's going on with economic coercion involving our nation in China. Well, that's happening. So it is quite alarming that that China has these beliefs, that China has the drives, and China has the certainly the logistics and the ability to carry out those warfare activities. We don't see it as warfare, but it is. I mean, they think about it. I mean, we know that China hacked government websites, government intranets. That China caused a mass cyber attack in our country. What sort of country does that to a country that it's supposedly friendly with?
You mentioned that obviously the Western world has followed the China and Italy lockdown model, and of course nobody has followed it almost to the letter than the state of Victoria, where we should not remember that those 9 public housing towers in inner Melbourne, Dan Andrews put them under what I describe as a Wuhan
Shocking.
level 5 lockdown. We should never forget. And the demographics of those towers are supposedly the type of people that Dan Andrews cares about, and he put them under literal house arrest. They weren't allowed to leave their apartments, given food rations, and it's just gotten worse since then. I mean, you've seen it all happen with the incitement charges against the protest organisers and the Victoria Police wearing those aggressively and in some cases brutally shutting down the anti-lockdown rallies where they didn't lay a finger on Black Lives Matter in June. It is scary. It is. I say to people who are reading the Victorian lockdown on paper, yes, it is as bad as you see it on filtered through your social media or news.
Yeah, I'd hate to live in Victoria. I'd hate to live in Victoria, principally because, like I said before, I get angry about hearing about the things in Queensland and in people being restricted from coming to see dying parents and that. And if it was me, I'd probably be in jail. If I was living in Victoria, even as a member of Parliament, I'd probably be in jail because I just wouldn't accept some of the anti-freedom and anti-liberty things that we're seeing going on in the state of Victoria. It's crazy. Look, and to call a spade, I mean, the people in those towers you're talking about were mainly migrants, and they were mainly, from what I understand, there were a lot of Muslim Australians in those towers. So the story goes that linked to the debacle we saw in the hotel quarantine management or mismanagement. We had security guards that fraternised with infected, fraternised is the very politically correct term, fraternised with tourists that were in those hotels, and some of those security guards might have been of Muslim faith themselves and ended up going to big indoor celebrations, Islamic celebrations that I'm not sure whether they were allowed or not allowed under the law, but the reality was that they went on, and I could say that I could probably hazard a guess that they went on with a lot of knowledge that they were going on. And you can't organise big religious celebrations indoor without some advertising on social media or all the rest of it. So they were allowed to go on, and police turned a blind eye to that. At the same time, you couldn't go to a church, and you got these stupid rules now in some states where if you do go to a church, you can't sing a hymn. But so political correctness probably mismanagement caused the stuff up to begin with, and then political correctness caused the further stuff up by turning a blind eye to Muslim gatherings where it spread rapidly throughout the community. Then just to lock people down in their homes. I'm sorry, again, I couldn't care less what your excuse is, that you just do not take away people's freedom like that. That was wrong. That was wrong.
And obviously the Victorian Parliament hasn't sat much this year because, well, a lot of us have seen just how much premiers can be dictators with the use of these emergency powers which passed through parliaments many years ago. Dan Andrews, he only returns to Parliament if he wants to pass more emergency measures, like the 6-month extension to the state of emergency powers. He got that through with support of Fiona Patten, Animal Justice Party, and the Greens. Now is trying to get this omnibus bill through, which I'm sure you have heard much about it. That I thought it was just he could appoint any public servant to be an authorised officer and detain anyone indefinitely, but it actually can be anyone. So it actually is like the old Stasi in East Germany, where anyone potentially at any place could be an informant.
Yeah. Look, it's really, really anti-freedom. I don't know what else you can say about it. I mean, people, you tell the story about what's going on in Victoria and the laws, and people actually don't believe you. They think, oh, you're just making that up. It possibly can't be true. But it is true. They've designated authorised officers and given them the same powers as the police, probably greater powers, And now it's not about what you might have done, it's what that authorised officer might think you could do. And so they've got the ability to detain you, arrest you, perhaps even imprison you based on the likelihood, in their judgment, this authorised officer, not a policeman, but an authorised officer, in their judgment, what they think you might do. They think you might be a risk to public health. They think that you might go against health orders. Well, you're going to be locked up. I don't know how you adjudicate that, because if that goes to a court and the person's arguing, those, I've been unfairly arrested or unfairly imprisoned, well, how's the judge going to interpret a law that says that that person can be detained, can be arrested, simply because someone, an authorised officer, thinks they might potentially do something wrong? Well, anyone could get done for that. And again, look, it may be, in the vast majority of cases, it may be used for all of the so-called right reasons, but you just don't do it. It's a thin edge of the wedge. That is harming freedom, which is such a precious thing. You don't realise how precious it is because we've nearly always had it in Australia. Harming freedom, and to me, that just means that the cure is worse than the disease.
I know many people have also expressed concern about a new ASIO amendment bill that's currently before the federal parliament, which would allow more surveillance, questioning of younger people. And obviously, Peter Dutton, as Home Affairs Minister, I trust him to exercise or oversee such powers appropriately. But the thing is, heaven forbid, if there was Home Affairs Minister Christina Keneally, what would she do with such a power? She'd probably... Oh, your camera's just gone off for a moment.
I see that. I'm sorry. I've had... my screen went blank for a moment there. I panicked.
But I was going on to say that, Christina Keneally, she sees right-wing extremists everywhere. She'd probably try to... Well, she's tried to do whatever is in her power to shut down or sabotage the CPAC Australia events. Such power in the hands of her as Home Affairs Minister, that would be frightening.
Yeah. Look, you may be right on that. Look, I got to say that every time laws have been put in front of me as a member of the House of Representatives that look at further surveillance powers by agencies of the state, whether it's the federal police or whether it's ASIO, I always ask questions. And look, I may not have completely come up to speed with what's proposed around ASIO, but if it was something that there was some laws that recently were put through, and if they are those laws, I think that at the end of the day they still need warrants, and to me that's a safeguard. I mean, to search someone's house, unless it's Victoria now, but to search someone's house normally, you would need a warrant of the court, and that is only issued when a judge, a person that's versed in the law, that should be well versed in matters relating to privacy and freedom, actually says on the balance of odds, there's a high likelihood this person has done something wrong, and so we're going to allow the authorities to go in and search their home. Now, I would say that we have that. We've had that for a long time in Australia, that standing arrangement. So searching your home, searching your computer, searching your email account, searching, your mobile phone device, all of that probably would fall under the same category. And just because we expand the laws in terms of what's covered with that search, the principles just need to remain in effect, that in order for such a search and a breach of a person's privacy to go ahead, it should have a safeguard. So I've been satisfied that up until for every law that I've seen, that there has been that safeguard put in place.
In Victoria, it's getting to the stage now where if you are talking about human rights, you're declared a conspiracy theorist. That's how insane things are getting here, and we've seen Dan Andrews in a moment of, or you could say, frustration or snap, where he said, if I hear one more thing about human rights, and he says it's about human life. And I remember one of your colleagues at the Good Source, James McPherson, made the point. Dan Andrews obviously he hasn't given much consideration to the quality of human life, because often progressives talk about dying with dignity, but in regards to euthanasia. I think about all the hundreds of Victorians who've died from the coronavirus here in Victoria. There's been no dignity in their death. Most of them have died alone in a room with literally a bunch of faceless strangers. The families are not allowed to see them, to say goodbye, and then the funerals are limited to 10. This is, I call it basically the double whammy here.
Yeah. Look, that's right. What you've just said there. But I think there's almost a bit of a false narrative that goes on. I've heard a few people running this line of, why do we always think about the economy? Lives more important than the economy, or we're protecting lives, putting lives ahead of other things. Well, really, I just go back to those key points again. The virus is mainly survivable, 997 out of 1,000 or thereabouts, that you have to have pre-existing comorbidities in the majority of cases to actually die from it. And also the other fact that if you are not really, if you're not symptomatic, you're unlikely to be spreading it. Those are three knowns. And so, what are we protecting? If there's an asymptomatic person who most likely doesn't have it being locked up in their house, what is that? Whose life is in danger from that person? I mean, it's a false narrative. And it's also a false narrative to talk about the economy as if it's something separate to human lives. An economy isn't some artificial device that's controlled by bankers with levers. An economy is humans interacting with each other, trading with each other, humans doing things for the benefit of one another. And when you shut that down, when you essentially say, no, actually, we're going to end this interaction. We're going to end the societal interaction of humans in order to protect human lives. Well, what you do for a great degree of the public who find meaning in what they contribute to society is that you take away their will to live. And I got to tell you, I know that for a fact. I won't name names, but there's a little old lady that I know who all the time goes to work at her local church op shop. She's the queen of it, right? That's her meaning. And I didn't hear it directly, but I was told by someone that she was almost in tears when she was told that it has to shut down. And the thought was, what she said was, what am I going to do now? Just go home and be old.
Yeah, that is incredibly sad. And going back to the Victorian protesters that we've seen being arrested, a lot of them are older women. And I'm not sure if you saw that footage from the UK anti-lockdown protests where the British police knocked down to the ground an elderly lady. And this is supposedly the reason for these lockdowns is to save granny, and I've come up with this expression: we seem to be assaulting grannies to save grannies. The cognitive dissonance. We've also sadly seen, during this stage 4 lockdown, the intimidation of journalists both out on the street and online as well. You would have seen Avi Yemeni arrested and also harassed by Victoria Police. And I know that the usual Twitter people say, oh, he's not a real journalist. Well, who should get to decide who's a accredited journalist then? What, Daniel Andrews? I don't think that would be healthy for democracy. But we've also seen, I'm not sure if you've been following it like I have, the intense online harassment, bullying of particularly female journalists such as Rachel Blacksendale, who, in my opinion, should get the Golden Walkley or the Edward J. Morrow Award for journalism, for going in there almost every day to question Dan. The other ones, Alex White, Sophie Ellsworth, and Gabriella Power, they've been doing an outstanding job. And social media it's just gotten so much worse this year, and obviously it got off to a tragic start with the death of Wilson Gavin the day after he protested a drag story time. And I know that you quit Twitter after that because it was just too toxic for you.
Still is. Look, I again, a bit of that broke up, but I got the gist of what you were saying. Firstly, can I just mention Avi Yemeni? I mean, it's a dangerous world where people are designated by any government authority as being a journalist or not being a journalist. If you are reporting and you have a medium through which you're reporting, you are a journalist. You do not need a degree for that. I can tell you, as someone who actually got a journalism degree, you do not need a degree to be a journalist. And he works for Rebel News, which is an international news network, and yet he's treated like he's not a journalist. And regardless of whether he's a journalist or not, the treatment that's being meted out is just not right. It's against liberty, against freedom. And I'm going to say, like the other day, I'm a big fan of our police. I'm a big fan of our police. I got some really good friends who served and are serving in the Queensland Police Force. And I suspect that there are Victorian police officers who are gritting their teeth having to do what they are instructed to do. Some in the upper echelons I'm not so sure about, mind you, like those that are fronting press conferences. But the fish rots from the head, and it all starts with Daniel Andrews and the state of fear that he has turned Victoria into.
And we should also mention that, even before this pandemic, Victoria had its own political prisoner in Cardinal George Pell, who was exonerated by the High Court. And you would say probably Victoria's first refugee. He first went to New South Wales, and now he's going back to Rome. And that was, Andrew Bolt has documented this immensely. I interviewed on my show, personal friend of the Cardinal, John McCauley, about just how the senior Victoria Police, the lengths that they went to get complaints against George Pell. And thinking about that now, like, you still think about it now because it's just so chilling that that's what they did before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, that's I'm almost a bit worried to even talk about it because you get piled on talking about George Pell. But the reality is that he is an innocent man. People will probably, again, go off at me saying that, but by fact of law, he is an innocent
Yes,
man.
and that's what I accept.
Because in Australia, you are innocent until you are proven guilty, and the verdict by the High Court was overturned to not guilty. Therefore, he is innocent under Australian law. And when you read the stories, and look, I didn't get deeply involved with all of it. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal expert, but I did read some articles by lawyers and legal experts on what went down in the court cases, and it seems an extraordinary situation to me where you can have a range of evidence and testimonies that back up your version of events, and all you need is one person on the other side to be saying, no, that's not what happened, this is what that person did, without any other corroborating sort of evidence, and that you can be found guilty for that. Well, if that's the litmus test, boy, oh boy, how many major names could be lined up and found guilty? I mean, if you have someone who says that someone committed some offence against them, and they can pinpoint a time and a place where they both were there, but yet you have, let's say, half a dozen people that say to you, well, I was with the person, we saw what went down, and that didn't go down, but you can still get a guilty conviction, a guilty verdict and a conviction. I just don't know that that's actually justice. That's not how justice should be done in this country. So it's a weird, really bizarre thing that went on there, from the original police case that was brought to the actual decisions that were made by not just one but two Victorian courts. I don't understand how it all happened. I really don't.
Yes, it's one of the, sadly, not the only travesty of justice in the state of Victoria recently. But to mention another political prisoner and also another journalist, Julian Assange, you've been an advocate for bringing him home. You actually went to the UK when you were allowed to leave Australia with a independent MP, Andrew Wilkie, to see Julian Assange, and obviously he's still yet to be extradited, but it's very clear he's almost, well, more than a broken man. He's almost a zombie now. You actually met him, and this we shouldn't forget about this. Can you just explain your position on him and what you're advocating?
So I wouldn't describe him. I mean, I don't know. There's been a lot of time between when I saw him and now, but at the point in time that I saw him, which was February of this year, I wouldn't have described him as a zombie. He still had a very brilliant mind, and while he was articulate to a degree, while he was lucid, while he was still, a very, very thoughtful person, there was just a lingering sense of disorientation that I got out of him. And I guess that's what would happen if your life had got turned upside down, that you'd had to be holed up in an embassy for years on end and then ripped out of it and put into the harshest jail in the UK. And potentially facing life behind bars. I guess that you would be completely and utterly disoriented, as a person. But look, my stance on that just comes back to the whole freedom thing. I mean, this guy is a journalist. He is someone who collects information and reports on this information, within reason. He does not seek to alter the information greatly that he receives. So he is more of a purist in terms of a journalist and a reporter than a lot of the fake news mob out there who skew the news and twist it and put all sorts of slants and bias into it. He takes the facts and he republishes the facts as they are. Now, he was in receipt of data that a person, namely Bradley Manning, now Chelsea Manning, that a person took from the US Defense Department and made available to him, and that person committed a crime. So I have not been out there saying that this Manning should be vindicated, should be, pardoned or exonerated or whatever. That person did commit a crime under US law on US soil. Julian Assange was in receipt of that information. He didn't steal it, and he's not a US citizen. He's not a US subject. He was not in the United States when he received that information. And my question really is, I couldn't care whether it was the US or China or Zimbabwe or wherever. Are the laws of a country now to apply to people all over the planet? And how dangerous is that going to be? He's an Australian citizen, and I'm sorry, but the laws of a foreign nation should not apply to you unless you are reaching into that country. I mean, I can understand if you're doing something over the internet, but he wasn't doing that. He received something. So, again, for freedom.
It's
you
like
just can't support his arrest and his extradition. You can't.
It's like if Victoria Police tried to extradite yourself and Craig Kelly to face incitement charges in Victoria for, at the very least, sympathising with the anti-lockdown protests.
Don't give them ideas. Yes. Do not give them ideas.
And speaking of the pair of you, you've both been, well, I shouldn't say outspoken. You've just spoken about the drug that shall not be named, hydroxychloroquine, which it's not just listed as banned and a poison in Queensland, but also here in Victoria. And you and Craig published an open letter on
That's right.
You published it on. You obviously sent it to her. You published it on your Facebook pages, but you also published it on the Good Source. I'll just bring it up here for our audience. And you've also got a petition here as well. And can I just get your opinion on why this drug is apparently so demonized? Is it simply from the fact that Donald Trump has spoken highly of it and has taken it? Like, I sometimes wonder if he'd never mentioned it, would the timeline be different?
Yeah. Tim, you really badly broke up then, but I'll just speak in general to the hydroxychloroquine letter. So, sorry about that, mate. It just really, I couldn't hear much of what was just said. But we've written this letter to the Chief Health Officer. She's got a ban currently against doctors using hydroxychloroquine in Queensland as a treatment for patients who may have COVID-19 or maybe wanting to take it, I guess, as a preventative for COVID-19. And, we're not doctors. We're not out there saying that hydroxychloroquine works. What we're saying is have a look at the studies out there, and there are plenty of them which actually says that maybe it works. In fact, in a lot of cases, there's proven benefits. And the studies out there that are saying it is not dangerous. So it is, it's actually law in Australia. It's completely lawful for doctors to prescribe medicines to people off-label. It happens all the time. So a doctor comes across a particular treatment that may work, that in their view is not dangerous, and they can say to their patient, right, I'm going to run you on a course of this drug and this drug. So they prescribe it. They say to them, this is how the doses are going to be administered, and away they go and do it. That's been completely and utterly lawful up until now, where suddenly this hydroxychloroquine is this dangerous and deadly drug, even though it's used for a range of autoimmune problems, lupus, it's used for malaria, it's been used for yonks, but now it's the worst thing. And I can only think that really, really is based upon the fact that a certain man that lives in a certain avenue in Washington in the USA might have touted its benefits. If he hadn't have done that, we wouldn't have seen any of the hysteria. Because there's a doctor in Australia that's actually promoting a similar treatment for another drug called ivermectin, I think it is. It does a similar thing, in fact, and he's putting forward a similar sort of medical treatment or medical protocol where this drug can be used off-label. And I'm going to say he's probably hoping like hell that President Trump doesn't say anything about that, because it'll probably end up being banned too. But that's actually happening quite lawfully in the country. And what's happening also quite lawfully in the country right now is there is a trial. You can go and have a look. It's called COVID Shield, a trial going on to test out whether, surprise, surprise, hydroxychloroquine is worthwhile as a preventative measure for healthcare workers. And they're apparently seeing some success with it.
Yes, there's one that's happening at the local, I think it's, I won't say the hospital in case I get it wrong, but one of the local hospitals here. But don't forget that here in Australia, Clive Palmer is also an advocate for hydroxychloroquine, takes it himself, and has got announced a
He
stockpile
takes himself,
for
I
it.
didn't know that.
Well, that's what he told Andrew Bolt recently, and also he is challenging the constitutionality of these state border closures as well. The case will be heard in November. I know that the Morrison government was originally supporting it, but when the second wave happened here in Melbourne, they withdraw their support.
No.
But it's certainly needs to be decided by our High Court whether what all our state and territory leaders have been doing with the various border closures is actually lawful. And I've spoken to your good source colleague, Professor David Flint, about this, much expert in the Constitution, much more than you and I. And he says there's a strong case for striking down these border closures.
Yeah, there quite clearly is. I wish I had the Constitution in front of me to read out the section in it. But there is a section in the Constitution which clearly refers to free movement of goods and services, free and I'm not sure whether it says unfettered carriage, but basically that's what it insinuates, that there shall be no strictures on the movement of people or products from state to state. Here in Australia, we are one nation. So, I mean, it might be very popular in some quarters to do it, but whether or not it's popular is against the law, and that needs to be tested. I think there's going to be a good case. I think there may be some legal argument that certain restrictions or certain requirements may have to happen in times of pandemic in order to cross one border to another. But I can assure you the carte blanche rule that you can just lock down a border will just not be allowed. It will not be allowed. The Constitution does not allow it. And I go one step further to say that I really do hope that people who have been subject to the most egregious abuses of their freedom and liberty have lawyers that come forward to argue the case for them. And I know in certain circumstances that's already happened. Avi Yemeni, the young mother who was arrested in her house, Zoe Bueller, yep. So these cases also need to be taken to the highest court in the land to actually see whether there has been freedoms trampled upon, to ensure that it can never, ever happen again. And I got to tell you, if they go to the highest court in the land, the highest court says, well, you know what? It was allowed to be done, then maybe it might have just converted me to the cause of a Bill of Rights. It may have just converted me to the cause of a Bill of Rights, if that's the case, because you can't have a situation where government, for whatever reasons, can just ride roughshod over your God-given human rights. It just cannot happen. Your God-given freedom, that is sacrosanct. We're not here as a people to serve the government. That is not how democracy in this country works. The government is there, and government authorities are there as public servants to do what the word says: serve us, the public. So someone's got this really, really wrong in how they're rolling out all of these restrictions.
We've been going for just over an hour now. I know I had you booked for an hour. I still do want
That's
to
right.
discuss Australia 2021 if you're happy to keep going for a bit
Yeah,
longer.
I can probably talk for another 5 minutes and then I will have to go. But yeah, go ahead.
Because as you said, you've got important constituent work to do. But Australia 2021, obviously the Morrison government did a pretty good job locking in those two potential vaccines, the Oxford and University of Queensland. You lobbied for it to be voluntary, which I know was a concern for a lot of people. Are you satisfied with the assurances?
Yes, and look, I wanted it to be voluntary, but I didn't lobby for it. I didn't need to lobby for it because straight away the Prime Minister, after it was reported that he said it was going to be compulsory, he came out and said, no, it's not going to be compulsory. It will be voluntary. And I take him at his word on that. There is no compulsion, and there will be no compulsion over any vaccine. I'm a bit sceptical about the prospects of a vaccine, though. I mean, everyone was talking about the main one that was being done over in Oxford, AstraZeneca, I think it was, and suddenly this was the shining light, and now it's not because there's some problem that's turned out. I was talking to the CEO of a major pathology company in Australia who said to me that most vaccines, they take ages to develop if they are to have any efficacy, and even ones that have been that the years and years and years have been undertaken in order to get them right, some of them are still only 60% effective. So I've got some doubts about it.
Obviously, as I said in my introduction, Australia is going to have its hardest decade, and a lot of people have commented, given that, well, the Federal Biosecurity Act has banned Australians travelling overseas and people coming to Australia unless an exemption applies, and given that we have seen the negative coverage of, well, combination of both the Australian police state and nanny state, even though we've seen years of immigration population growth, demographers are actually predicting a decrease next year, because why would businesses want to invest in a country which is so massively constantly interfered with people's lives, shut so many businesses, and Australia and New Zealand could once again be the nations that are at the mercy of the tyranny of distance. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about the Australian population potentially dispersing into the regions, and there's been a lot of speculations during when 7 out of the 8 state and territory leaders have agreed to open the borders by Christmas, whether we'll have a lot of Victorians fleeing during the summer window. Or, for example,
fleeing forever.
Yeah,
probably.
Would you encourage Victorians when they're able to do so to migrate to Mackay?
Oh, well, look, we need workers in Mackay, that's for sure. And there's probably a few empty homes for sale, or empty homes that could use people in them, and we could do with the population up here, that's for sure. Yeah, I would encourage that. But can I just say that on the international borders, look, this is about the only measure I really do think, apart from washing your hands and maybe a bit of social distancing, okay, the 14-day mandatory quarantine period is about the only measure that has really stopped transmission within Australia. Most other things, apart from the washing the hand, apart from a bit of social distancing, most other things are just window dressing. So that really has saved us. And I think that, you know, again, we can't just keep the international borders, completely locked down. It's going to have to be managed. But while the virus is prevalent in other parts of the world, we're probably going to have to keep some sort of quarantine measure in play. And if you want to travel around the world, well, I guess adding on an extra 2 weeks and your return journey back to Australia is just going to have to be something that you do. But it's going to have to be managed.
I know that Scott Morrison, he wants to transition away from mandatory hotel quarantine, which is very expensive, back to home quarantine,
Yeah.
which is much more affordable. And there's talk about this rapid coronavirus saliva testing, which obviously, I don't know how many times you've been tested for coronavirus with the nose poke and down
Once.
the throat.
Yeah, I got.
But obviously, doing the saliva test with the 20-minute turnover, that would allow much more a higher turnaround if we have to live with this virus for testing.
And sure, that's going to be great if the technology is there to actually rapid test people, so you can go and sit in a waiting lounge in an airport for half an hour, after getting your test. That's great, because again, the facts just say that if the person is going to test negative to it and the person is asymptomatic, well, they're not going to be able to spread anything anyway. So they should be able to just go back on a flight home if they need to fly home again, or go into their normal place of residence if they live in the capital city that they internationally flew into. And if you really, really, really want to have some other measure, make them self-quarantine at home or self-isolate at home for 2 weeks just to be on the safe side. But these things can be worked out, and they will be worked out. As I say, it's going to have to be managed, and that management means as we become aware of new technologies, new breakthroughs in testing, and we have the ability to roll them out, that we do that, and we manage the process and don't have stuff-ups like what happened down in Victoria.
Yes, it is. Oh, it's no exaggeration to say it's the greatest public policy failure in at least Victoria's history, if not Australia. I just want to sneak in one last question. Scott Morrison announced a furthering of the digital revolution, because probably the work from home will be a permanent feature going forward, regardless of if there's a vaccine. Just people. It's because people have learnt that it's more viable now, and we heard the announcement of the NBN upgrade. Obviously, there's the 5G rollout continuing, which we've had a few technical difficulties during this show. So certainly, both of those developments
Thanks, Malcolm.
are welcome. And also, well, if we're all going to be in our different homes, we're going to need a bit more of that coal to use, or gas, as Scott Morrison's been advocating.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I think it'll work in some instances, this work from home routine. In others, it won't. It's going to be horses for courses, but you're right. If more people are going to be at home, there's going to be more need to have the home fires burning, and that means more coal.
And we've got plenty of it. We've also got plenty of uranium as well. We've got so many minerals here. We just need to let the miners dig it out.
We could have a massive energy revolution in Australia of the kind that the US had, if only we can do things environmentally sound, but the ridiculous strictures, the ideological strictures, need to be taken off the sector, and we would have a jobs boom, and we would also have cheap energy, because it shouldn't just be about digging the stuff out of the ground or pumping it out of wells or whatever. It should be also about using it for our own national benefit as well. They do that in the US so well, but not so well here in Australia.
Well, I'll let you go now. Thank you so much
Thank you very much, Tim.
giving me your time tonight.
And
Keep.
just check that list to make sure I don't get in trouble from the journalists.
Yes, make sure you
Not
email
a
it
neo-Nazi,
straight back.
not a racist, not a conspiracy theorist. Thank you.
Because they're probably all watching this and
Thanks very much.
monitoring. Keep up your advocacy. It's never been a better time to be a vocal backbencher. All right, everybody, that's the show for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow night for the Uncockables with, of course, David Hiscock, and hopefully back James Fox Higgins again. There's a lot to talk about. And then, of course, Trad Tasman Talk, 6 p.m. Melbourne time on the Unshackled YouTube channel. And obviously publishing regular news and analysis on the unshackled.net. There will be a few more WilmsFront episodes coming up, not just the weekly edition, so stay tuned for those. And of course, my followers on all my social media will be notified on that. Chris Minister said he was keen to get off. Yes, if you were listening earlier on, he's got to help that Victorian woman get up to see her mother's funeral in Mackay. That's certainly, I would say, a lot more important than continuing to chat with me. Even though it was an extremely great chat. I hope you, my audience, enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time. As I always say, stay sane, stay happy, and I always have the disclaimer, I'm not allowed to stay free in Victoria, because that could be classified as incitement. So please make sure that you look after yourself, and yeah, we will get through this. Good night, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com or Rational Rise TV to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting theunshackled.net to view all our shows. And to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.